Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here to talk about my November reading plans, and also to throw you a couple of recommendations as well. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the various readathons and buddy reads that I have going on in November, but I have a couple of things that will not be included in this video. They will be in, I think, later videos. One of them is my TBR for the 6 musical readathon, which I am co-hosting, and the other is my TBR for the Dragon Prince Minithon, which I created and I'm also co-hosting, and I am just so excited about both of those projects. I know it's kind of a lot going on close together, but the Dragon Prince one only has 3 challenges and they're completely optional, so I don't think it's too much for me to take on. We'll see, but I'm pretty confident about it. And hopefully if you guys choose to participate in both of those, which would be wonderful, we would love to have you, then hopefully it's easy to stack those so you're not too overwhelmed with challenges and books and everything. And by the way, I will put timestamps separating the TBR and the recommendations parts of this video in case only one of those interests you or applies to you, so definitely look in the description box for that as well. Basically everything is in the description box. So I'm going to start out with the buddy reads that are not part of a specific readathon or reading challenge or anything, and the first one is Crown Duel by Sherwood Smith. This is the first book in a duology, and now this is the bind-up version. I'm going to be buddy reading this with Margaret from The Word Nerd. She has just said such wonderful things about these 2 books, and I was very interested in reading them. It sounds like it's going to be right up my alley, and I don't know too much about the story. I'm pretty sure it's about a girl who goes undercover in a royal court or something, like she's a spy or something like that. I don't know, but I'm really excited about this. Can't wait to read that with Margaret. And then another buddy read I'm doing is The Girl the Sea Gave Back by Adrienne Young, and this will be with Alana from The Awkward Book Nerd. This is actually an advanced reader's copy. I did not receive this for review. I actually got it passed on by a friend. By the way, I always try and disclose when I did receive something for review, and if I forget to mention it, it's usually because I did get it passed on by a friend or somebody who didn't need it or who already read it or whatever. So that's how I try and differentiate them. This is a book that is, I think, like Viking or Norse inspired. She also wrote Sky in the Deep, which I have not read, but I have seen that like officially you are supposed to be able to read this book separately from the first one, which is why I'm doing it, because otherwise I don't believe in reviewing books in series that you haven't read the whole thing. That doesn't really seem fair to me, so that's why I'm still going ahead to read this. And I think it's about a girl who, something about like prophecies. And I think our main character can see the future. And also right at the beginning of the month, I will be reading Fairest by Gail Carson Levine, or I should say rereading. I have read that book several times before, and that is as part of the reading group that I have with Taylor from Page Screen Taylor and Giselle from Giselle Bradley. I will link our most recent live show, which was on Ella Enchanted. That was what started out as the Artemis Fowl read-along, and then after finishing all 8 books, we were like, we really love reading and talking about middle grade with each other. So it kind of turned into this. I hope to have a more official announcement on that, like on how that's going to be going forward, probably when the new year comes around. But until then, we are having a lot of fun rereading Gail Carson Levine, and after we discuss that in early November, I think it should be the 10th, but I will put that in the description box. We will also be reading the prequel, which is Ogre Enchanted, so that will be read during the later part of November and discussed probably in the early part of December. Sorry, I feel like this turned into an announcement video for a second, and I did not mean it to. Okay, so now moving into some of the readathons and reading challenges I'm participating in. The ones I'm going to be talking about in this video are the Believe-a-thon, also known as the Believe in the Magic Readathon, which is all about middle grade books, so you guys know I had to participate. The second round of Vaultathon, which is created and hosted by Margaret from The Word Nerd. By the way, Believe-a-thon is by Catherine Hetherington. Again, all the details will be in the description box. And also the Indigathon, which is running for the whole month of November and is all about reading Indigenous literature. That actually came to my attention because Brody from Et2Brody, one of my co-hosts for the 6th readathon, is actually one of the, I think, creators and also hosts for Indigathon as well. So starting out with Vaultathon, this runs from November 18th through the 24th, and this round is featured around Treasure Planet, which is definitely an underhyped animated movie gem. And the first challenge is to read a book that reimagines a classic. And for that one, I have The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This was one of my most anticipated releases last year, and I still haven't read it. I even put it on retellings that I wanted to read this year in that challenge that I'm doing, and I still haven't read it, so this really needs to happen. I think I lost steam a little bit because I found out recently that it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be, but it does still sound interesting. It's set during the Trojan War, and we follow one of the women from the Trojan War, and I think one of the men as well. Like, I think it's dual perspective, so we'll see how that goes. And then I'm using one book for 2 of the prompts, and that is one that takes place in space and one that has a twist. And for that one, I'm going to be reading Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. I've heard that the plot is quite twisty in this series. This is the first book in a trilogy, and I don't actually know if any of this is set in space, but it is sci-fi and there's stars on the cover, so I'm gonna count it and hope that's okay. But this is a very beloved series here on BookTube, and it's about a girl who one day stumbles into a metal hand, like a giant metal robot hand, and the plot is about what happens after that discovery. I actually am not sure I'm gonna like this. It's one of those books that I kind of got caught up in the hype for, and then the more I heard about it, the more I'm like, this does not sound like the kind of sci-fi I like, especially since my friend Huck, I remember she was kind of disappointed in it too, and I feel like we have very similar tastes in science fiction. So not sure how this is gonna go, but I do want to read it and just get it off my TBR, if nothing else. I think it's told in like interview format, which hopefully will make it go quicker. And then another prompt is to read a book that has romance, and because of all the other overlapping readathons and prompts and books I'm going to be reading, that will definitely not be a problem. So I don't know what book I'll be reading for that, but I'm sure one of them will have romance in it. There are also a couple of non-reading challenges, which are reading a book while listening to music and reading somewhere that serves food, so like a cafe or a restaurant or something. And I think those would actually be kind of fun to do, especially the cafe one, so I might try and do those, but no promises. Next, I'm going to talk about the books that I hope to read for the Believe in the Magic Readathon, also known as the Believe-a-thon. And I'm actually going to start out, like, Gavin put together this really beautiful compendium that has all of the prompts and suggestions for the prompts and just like what the readathon is all about. And one of the things that is in there is a couple of quotations from Katherine Rundell, who is a middle grade author, and she wrote The Wolf Wilder, which is one of my favorite books. And I've read another book from her that I didn't like so much, but overall I just really enjoy her as an author, and she just really captured, I think, the magic of middle grade literature. So I'm going to read a little bit from that right now. There are times in adult life, at least in mine, when the world has seemed blank and flat and without truth. It's in those moments that children's books, for me, do that which nothing else can. Children's books today do still have the ghost of their educative beginnings, but what they are trying to teach us has changed. Children's novels, to me, spoke, and still speak, of hope. They say, look, this is what bravery looks like. This is what generosity looks like. They tell me, through the medium of wizards and lions and talking spiders, that this world is a world full of people who tell jokes and work and endure. Children's books say the world is huge. They say hope counts for something. They say bravery will matter, wit will matter, empathy will matter, love will matter. So just soak that in for a little bit. I was already interested in the readathon, and then as soon as I started reading that part, I'm like, oh, this is something I absolutely have to participate in. So let's talk about the books I hope to read. The first challenge is to read a book featuring magic, and for that one I hope to get to The Lost Kingdom of Bamar by Gail Carson Levine. This is a prequel to The Two Princesses of Bamar, which came out many years before, and that is one of my favorite books. That was definitely a formative book for me, I think, when I was younger, and I'm pretty sure this is going to have magic in it because it is set in kingdoms where there are magical creatures, and it's about our main character Peregrine. She grows up in the kingdom of Lakti, I think it is, or maybe the people are known as the Lakti, and they really look down on the people of Bamar and the country of Bamar. And then one day she finds out that she is actually a Bamar by birth, and so this is about her journey, I think finding out more about herself and kind of learning that her prejudices are wrong, and I really hope this doesn't let me down. I'm a little nervous because The Two Princesses of Bamar was such a powerful book for me and still is when I reread it, but I am still really excited about this one. The second challenge is to read a book featuring myth or legend, and this is where my overlapping TBR for Indigathon comes in, because I hope to read Coyote Tales by Thomas King, and the illustrations are by Byron Eggenschweiler. And this is a collection, I think it's just a very small bind-up of two kind of novella-length legends that are about the character of the coyote and kind of his role as a trickster, and I don't really know too much about it, but it's so short that I don't want to. By the way, the Indigathon has this really wonderful bingo board about how to guide your reading, and I wrote down all these lovely notes about what the books I picked fit for which challenges, and now I can't find them. So I will try to remember the ones that I can, but I'll just do my best. I'll leave all the information down below. The next Believe-a-thon prompt is to read a book that deals with real life issues, and that is another Indigathon pick for me, and that is The Case of Windy Lake. And I'm also counting that for the Believe-a-thon prompt of a strong sense of friendship, because this is about a group of 4 kids who are, I think, cousins, and they all get together and they end up solving a mystery. And for Indigathon, this counts for middle grade and also for the on reservation prompt. And I think for a couple of others as well. Oh, mystery is another one it counts for. And I'm really hoping I can get a hold of this one because I don't think my library has it, so I might end up buying it during the month. Next for a Believe-a-thon is to read a book that is set in the past, and for that one I will be reading The Ghost Who Wore Grey by Bruce Coville. This is the sequel to The Ghost in the Third Row, which I really enjoyed. This is a middle grade paranormal series, and I think this one is about a ghost from the Civil War. So I'm interested to see how that is dealt with. I do remember in the first book it handled issues in a lot more sensitive and compassionate way than I thought, given the time the book was written in, so I'm reasonably hopeful about this one. And I'm also using this for the Believe-a-thon prompt of an atmospheric or creepy book, because even though it's not like scary or anything, I think a book that involves ghosts could count for that prompt. The next Believe-a-thon prompt is to read a seasonal book. Now this one, I always thought this was considered YA versus middle grade, but this is actually one of Gavin's official recommendations for the prompt, and I figure if it's good enough for the host, it's good enough for me. Plus we all know how bad I am at differentiating between age ranges, so it's quite possible that I am just wrong about this, and that is East by Edith Peteau. This is a fairy tale retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, and I feel like this is one that is very well liked and well received. I feel like it gets very high reviews. This definitely is very seasonal because it's very like wintry and kind of cold seeming. And I just realized that the cover design is by Charlie Bowater. I think this must be a cover redesign. I think the original cover was different, but there was a sequel that was recently released as well, and I'm just so looking forward to this. I love fairy tale retellings and I love atmospheric fantasy, so this sounds perfect. The next Believe-a-thon challenge is to read a book with an animal character, and that one is also doubling up with my Indigathon TBR, and that is The Girl and the Wolf by Katharina Vermette, and this counts for the picture book prompt. I actually have this one out from my library right now, and I just flipped through a few of the illustrations and it looks stunning, so I'm very much looking forward to that. And finally, the last two prompts for the Believe-a-thon are a classic children's story and to reread your personal childhood favorite. And for that one, I'm actually doubling up with a book that I am reading for a couple of the other readathons I'm participating in, and that is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I feel like I have put this on so many TBRs at this point that it's getting a little ridiculous. I have been meaning and wanting to reread this book for a long time now. It's been a few years, but it's one of my favorites, and I do feel like it's going to be really lovely and cozy in the fall or winter months, so hopefully I can finally get to it this month. And now we're going to get into the recommendations portion of this video. This is specifically for Believe-a-thon because I will not turn down any opportunity to gush about middle grade books and to recommend them to people. So I have just picked one book for each challenge, and even though a lot of these could double up for multiple challenges, I wanted to give you guys options. I'm going to try and keep this as succinct as possible because I have a tendency to ramble on when I'm talking about books I love. So for the book featuring magic, I recommend The Real Boy by Anne Ursu. This is a really, really lovely fantasy story. It would also definitely count for the real life issues prompt and for the strong sense of friendship prompt. Our main character, Oscar, he has autism, even though that word is not used because, again, it's in a fantasy setting. The author has specifically confirmed that, and she actually talks about it in an interview, which I will link in the description. The representation is not own voices, but the author does have a son who is autistic, and he was actually the motivation for her to write this. She did do a lot of research and preparation for this book, so from what I've heard, it does still seem to be an honest portrayal of that. This is just a really lovely story about a boy named Oscar and how he starts making friends, and the fact that he's not really appreciated for his abilities, and then children in a very rich town nearby start getting sick, and it's up to Oscar and his new friend to figure out what's wrong and to stop this from happening, because it seems like magic is starting to fade from this world. For the Myth or Legend challenge, I recommend The Jumbies by Tracy Baptiste. Now, I actually talked about this in a recent wrap-up, so I'll link that if you want more information on it, but even though this was not a favorite book for me, I think one of the strongest elements about it was the myth or legend aspect. Plus, this is based on a Haitian folktale that I think is called The Magic Orange Tree, and I had never read anything that was based on folklore from Haiti before, so I think that is so wonderful that we are seeing that. I just think the atmosphere and the Jumbi creatures were such a well-written part of this story. And it's about a main character, Corinne, and there is a Jumbi in the forest who starts taking a special interest in her and her family. And even though Corinne has never believed in Jumbis before, she's faced with the fact that they do in fact exist, and they're coming for her village. So she has to team up with a few of her friends to try and stop them. For a book dealing with real life issues, I recommend Amina's Voice by Hina Khan. This is an own voices Muslim book, and we follow our main character Amina, and she is going through a really hard time because her best friend, who she's known for so long, is wanting to change her name and become more Americanized. So Amina is starting to struggle between wanting to fit in with this American culture that she's a part of while also holding on to her family's traditions. So she has that conflict going on, and then in the midst of all of these worries, her local mosque is vandalized. So it deals with Islamophobia and prejudice, and I think it does it in such a thoughtful way. I think this is definitely a book that is very suited to its target audience, you know. I think it's written in a way that is, you know, appropriate for a younger audience, but reading it as an adult, I still found it really powerful and wonderful. I mean, I gave it 5 stars. I really loved it. Also, as a bonus recommendation, I just finished More to the Story by Hina Khan this last month in October, and it was fantastic. So if you want an own voices Muslim story that is a contemporary reimagining of Little Women, or at least kind of loosely based on that, highly recommend that one. For a book set in the past, I recommend The Handbook for Dragon Slayers by Mary Haskell. Now, Mary Haskell is one of my favorite authors, but I feel like the books I tend to talk about from her are generally The Princess Curse and occasionally The Castle Behind Thorns, but The Handbook for Dragon Slayers is also really wonderful. And I can technically count this as set in the past because even though it is a fantasy world, it is loosely based on, is it the world of like, I think the 11 or 1200s, possibly in the like England area of Europe. I'm not sure precisely where it is set, but it's definitely based on a real time period, so I'm gonna count it. This book is pretty much what it sounds like. We follow our main character Tilda, and she has a club foot, and that has made life very difficult for her in some ways because of the way people treat her, and we follow her and her best friend, who I think is her lady-in-waiting. It's been a while since I read this one, but I think it's her lady-in-waiting, and a goofy knight friend of theirs, and they go on an adventure to try and find and slay a dragon. For a book with a strong sense of friendship, I recommend Midsummer's Mayhem by Rajani LaRocca. This is a middle grade retelling of A Midsummer Night's Dream that is own voices for the Indian American rep, and there is just so much wonderful like fairy elements and cooking magic and just so many things I love. This is one of those books that's like, this is a perfect book for me. I recognize that not everyone is going to completely fall in love with it, but even if you don't have the particular interest that I do in Shakespeare, for example, I do think it is still a really, really strong middle grade story about friendship and about changing friendships and about family relationships and how our main character Mimi fits into her family and her baking abilities and how she really has to learn to trust in her own abilities. And onto that, a really fun cooking contest subplot and some magical fairy mischief. This was just a wonderful time. And by the way, I didn't feel like getting out the entire stack of books, so even though I own all of these, I'll just be inserting pictures of them. I'm sorry. For the atmospheric or creepy book, I recommend The Steps Up the Chimney by William Corlett. This is the first book in the Magician's House series, I think it's called, and I was actually introduced to this because my wonderful friend Claudia from Spencer's Library actually sent me the first book. It's one of her favorites from when she was younger. It was a really formative middle grade book for her, and I really enjoyed this. And one of the things that I liked most about it was something I didn't really expect from the premise, and that is this very sinister, creepy atmosphere in this rambling old house. We follow 3 siblings who go to stay with their uncle, I think, during the winter break. They encounter a strange man who may or may not be a magician, and they start exploring this house and trying to figure out what exactly is going on with this weird house and these strange people that live in this village. And again, this is not one I expected to be like super creepy, and it wasn't like scary or anything, but like the ever so slightly unsettling atmosphere was just really, really well done. For a seasonal book, I'm going to recommend Beastkeeper by Kat Hellison. This is a middle grade beauty. I guess I can stop saying middle grade because all of these are obviously middle grade. This is a retelling of the Beauty and the Beast story, and I love this one. I talk about it quite a bit. It actually took me rereading this one to really appreciate it, but it is definitely dark and strange, and it's a really fascinating blend of fairy tale and modern day, because even though the story is more or less set in our real world, it doesn't always feel like it is, and I really liked that. And there's a lot of stuff about these strange overlapping curses, and our main character is a young girl who, she is actually the Beast character of the Beauty and the Beast story, which is not something we see a lot in books. Her family has some kind of curse on them, and this book is really about how those curses play out and affect her and the people around her. And this is just such a wonderfully wintry feeling book. That's why I have it in the seasonal category. And it is, some of it is just so chilling, but some of it is really beautiful as well. One of the things that I really liked about it is like this underlying theme of love. And you know, in a lot of fairy tale settings, it's kind of like love conquers all and love can break the curse. And in this case, it's like, yes, love is powerful, but be careful how you use it. And I just find that so interesting, so highly recommend that one. For an animal character, I'm going to go back to Katherine Rundell with The Wolf Wilder. This is set in Russia, and it's about a young girl, I think her name is Feodora? I think so. And her mother are wolf wilders, which means that they take in the wolves who have been they like adopted by members of the Russian aristocracy and turned into pets, basically. So they, so Feodora and her mother actually take these wolves in and sort of wild them. You know, they retrain them to be wild creatures and to survive on their own and to not be pets anymore, because they need to be able to take care of themselves when their idiot owners just abandon them. And again, this is a very atmospheric story. This one could definitely count for the seasonal one because it is so wintry and cold feeling. But the characters of this are so wonderfully developed. The writing is exquisite, and the animal characters, like there are 3 wolves in particular that are kind of Feodora's companions. I will warn you now that some of the scenes are very hard to read because the wolves are just such wonderful characters and you don't want anything bad to happen to them, but it is such a fantastic book. And finally, for classic, you know I want to recommend The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, but I'm actually going to give you another option because I feel like I have talked about that book enough already. And that is Emily of New Moon by Ella Montgomery. I actually really want to continue the series. I've only read the first one so far, but if you've read the Anne of Green Gables books, I think there are some similarities between these 2 series by Montgomery, but I still think they stand on their own. And I think overall, at least the first Emily book was a little bit darker and a little bit more melancholy than Anne of Green Gables. Even though there's definitely some sad things in that book and in that series, I think it feels more present in the Emily books, or at least the first one, which I have read, but it's still a really lovely story about a girl making friends and starting to fit in with her community and her town and growing to love her family. Her father actually dies right at the beginning of the book, and I think she gets sent to live with, is it her aunt and uncle or like relatives of hers? And it takes a while, but you know, of course they warm up to her and she warms up to them, and I just remember really enjoying this book. I do definitely want to read the sequels at some point. So those are some of my recommendations for Believe-a-thon if you've been having trouble with some of the prompts, or if you're just looking for more great middle grade books, which I think we all should be. And as Gavin did in his compendium that he put together, I'm going to finish with a quote from Katherine Rundell. And I believe both of these are taken from her essay that she just came out with, which is, I think, something like why you should still read children's books even though you are so old and wise. Children's books are not a hiding place. They are a seeking place. Plunge yourself soul forward into a children's book. See if you do not find in them an unexpected alchemy, if they will not undig in you something half hidden and half forgotten. Read a children's book to remember what it was to long for impossible and perhaps not impossible things. Go to children's fiction to see the world with double eyes, your own and those of your childhood self. Refuse unflinchingly to be embarrassed, and in exchange you get the second star to the right and straight on till morning.